Dobar dan, dragi gledatelji. Dobrodošli na podcast sa Deputy Assistant Secretary General za javnu diplomaciju u NATO-u, znači druga ruka javne diplomacije u NATO-u, Carmen Romero. S njome ćemo danas proći mnogo važnih pitanja o tome, o njezinom životopisu, o njezinom iskustvu u radu u Dejtonskom mirovnom procesu, njezinom iskustvu 18 godina u NATO-u, nove prijetnje koje su se razvile tokom tih 18 godina poput dezinformacija i ostalih cyber prijetnji. Te na kraju ćemo proći ono što dolazi uskoro krajem mjeseca, a to je summit u Madridu, gdje će biti govora o NATO 2030. i o novom strateškom konceptu. Evo, uživajte. Okay, welcome to our second part of the project of the NATO Week. NATO Week is a project organized by Diplomatic Club Faculty of Political Science. Yesterday was the first part where we released the student papers regarding the NATO, and we already filmed one podcast with Ambassador Nobilo from Croatia in NATO. And today I am very welcome to an honor to do a podcast with Carmen Romero, Deputy Assistant Secretary General from Public Diplomacy. And after that we will have podcast with Mr. Rogac from Head Office of Multilateral in Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Croatia. And tomorrow we will have NATO simulation, the North Atlantic Council simulation. I'm very welcome and pleased to have you as our guest. You have a very impressive CV, if I may add, and one of the things that popped out was that you were more than 3 years in foreign affairs correspondent in Paris. You were a special correspondent for the Western Balkans. You were assigned for some special stuff like Dayton Peace Process, Kosovo Crisis, and NATO campaign in former Yugoslavia. Can you tell us, please, a little bit more about that experience? That is one of the most important historical moments in our country.
Well, thank you very much for your question, and I have to say that it was a very rewarding experience to work as the foreign affairs correspondent and to have the privilege to get a flavor of the Western Balkans, a very beautiful region full of wonderful people. And I have to say that the Western Balkans region has come a long way since the conflicts of the 1990s, when I was a journalist. And it goes without saying that a lot of progress has been made in terms of reforms. The region has clearly advanced, but in recent times we have also seen tensions rise, including in Kosovo, also in Bosnia and Herzegovina, with more aggressive rhetoric, stalled reforms, and also foreign actors working to undermine progress. So what I want to say is that I can assure you that NATO will continue to promote stability, security, and cooperation in the region. And we all agree on the importance of our NATO presence in the region to continue to help, including our KFOR peacekeeping mission in Kosovo, and our offices in Sarajevo and Belgrade. Our cooperation with the European Union and also other like-minded partners remains essential. So we will continue to work together to preserve stability and support reforms in the region of the Western Balkans, because this is important for our security, for the stability in the Western Balkans, but it's also important for NATO, for peace and stability in the whole of Europe. And we see the future of the Western Balkans in Euro-Atlantic cooperation and also in integration for those who want it and who are qualified to do so. At the same time, I also want to say that we are determined to help the countries of the region to continue to implement real reforms for the benefit of all the citizens, including you, young people.
Thank you very much. I mean, NATO, almost the whole Western Balkans are NATO, except Bosnia and Herzegovina, Serbia, and Kosovo, as you mentioned, that you are working and progressing in these countries. And how do you look at Croatia today as a relatively new ally? Croatia joined NATO in 2009. And what would you say that Croatia got the most out of the membership in NATO, and what did NATO get from Croatia?
Well, Croatia is well into its second decade already as a NATO member. So I would not describe it as a new ally. Since it joined NATO, Croatia has contributed to our shared security in the alliance and even well beyond. And I still remember Croatian forces contributing to assistance efforts in Afghanistan for many, many years, doing a fantastic job. And I have to say that Croatia is a very committed ally. It makes important contributions to our shared security. Croatian troops have also served not only in Afghanistan, but also in NATO's battle groups in Lithuania, in Poland, and in our missions in Kosovo and Iraq. So Croatia supports many things, also NATO partnerships, including in the Western Balkans. And we welcome Croatia's efforts to increase defense spending and to meet what we call the 2% guideline by 2024. And we also welcome Croatia's strong support for NATO and EU cooperation, which has reached, as you know, unprecedented levels. So all this to say that Croatia plays a very important role in NATO. And I see this every day, both from a political and a military point of view. So I'm convinced that Croatia has also benefited a lot since it joined the alliance. NATO has also brought more security to Croatia and has contributed to modernizing your country. So I would describe this as a win-win situation for NATO and for Croatia.
Yeah, I agree. I would say that is a win-win situation also. The interesting thing that you mentioned was the 2% guidelines till 2024 of defense spending budget. How is it going? Is it going in that direction? Is it achievable goal until 2024?
All nations, I can tell you, are making an effort to get there. It's more difficult for some nations. It's easier for others. But everybody's committed to spending more, to investing more in our security. Now, with the situation in Ukraine, with the unprovoked war launched by President Putin in Ukraine, we see that in Europe, we cannot take our security for granted anymore, and therefore we have to invest more in our security. So I can tell you that also Croatia is making an effort, as well as all the members of the organization.
Yeah, I agree. There are a lot of security threats, but before we get into it, I wanted to also say one very interesting fact from your resume. You are working now 18 and more years, 18 and something years in NATO. It must be a wonderful job since you are in NATO that long. What would you say before we get to all these security topics, civilian security, the military security, etc.? What would you say that was the biggest challenge that you faced in this period?
Well, I prefer to speak about opportunities more than challenges, but at the same time, I can tell you that one of the biggest challenges that I faced when I started working for NATO in my first days was to understand what my colleagues around were talking about, including in meetings with the Secretary General. In NATO, we tend to use many, many acronyms, and for me, it was really difficult to understand and to follow the conversations. I remember that one day I told my boss at that time, who was the NATO spokesperson when I was deputy spokesperson, James Apathurai, I told him, I don't understand anything. How can I do my job if I don't understand? And he looked at me, smiling, and he said, Carmen, it's going to take just 2-3 months. But I said to myself, no, I need to understand earlier. So I started taking notes of all the acronyms that I heard, and I tried to understand what was being said. But that was a very practical challenge. Otherwise, my biggest challenge has been as one of the heads of our communicators team, is to make sure that we modernize our communication. So basically, it's about my biggest challenge over all this year has been the constant transformation of our work to make sure that we in NATO are using the right tools to communicate to our audiences in a transparent and in a credible way, and also that we are present where our citizens get their information from. This is a very fast-moving information space, and it's very important to keep up with the changes and to be in the right platforms at the right time. So this is and has been a fascinating challenge, but a big challenge, I have to say.
Yeah, I agree. NATO has a lot of acronyms. Myself, I'm also confused with it. H quarters and stuff like that. When I was looking for the internship opportunities, I was very confused with all the acronyms, and I totally agree.
And did you get the internship?
I applied. We will see now what will happen.
Okay,
the
good
results
luck.
are in August. Thank you very much.
You will need my recommendation. It's important, very important to prepare very well. Right now, I'm supported by one of my closest collaborators. My assistant in this moment is an intern, and Patricia Alberman. And I can tell you that to be an intern in NATO is very interesting because you get to see everything that we do in the division. So I wish you good luck, prepare well, and I hope that you will be with us soon.
Thank you very much. I will take this as a note and as an to grow up and to prepare more for the next challenge as an intern. Looking back, I would say, you talked about a lot of a constant transformation in NATO, the information to keep up with the challenge, especially the social media. Something that also changed a lot for the last 18 years was distribution and information, the social media, the internet, the rise of internet and everything. Could you explain us what kind of strategies and tactics NATO uses against disinformation, misinformation and propaganda today? Did NATO develop some specific institutions, programs and fact checkers?
Yes, thank you for this very important question. So it's something that is it's our part of our daily work to make sure that we are prepared to deal with the new challenges from the information space, and we are learning by doing. So what we are doing is to work very, very closely with other organizations, with the European Union, with the think tank community, to be in a position to identify what the threats are in the information environment. This is something that we have been doing for many years, but we have seen that the disinformation and the hostile information activities continue to increase, and by working in a very coordinated way, we can be more and more effective. So this is something that we are very focused on. We publicly refute false claims. We debunk the main disinformation narratives aimed at us. We coordinate to share information and insight with many of our partners, and NATO and our member states are confronted with this challenge, especially quite recently. So in NATO, we will continue to defend our values, to promote our interests, and to keep our nations safe and free by making them also increasingly aware of the dangers of false narratives and misleading information. We have produced, since you asked me about the tactics, we have produced a toolbox for countering hostile information activities, which reflects the Alliance's twin track model. So we have a model that is understand, engage, and coordinate at the same time. So to understand first means to analyze constantly the information environment and to identify what is relevant to our mission and to our interests. Then to engage means communicating in a proactive way our story, our political decisions, and we do so embedding the insights we get from analyzing the information space. This allows us to conduct tailored strategic communications and also engagement that can most effectively debunk, counter disinformation where appropriate, of course. And then coordination is very, very important because addresses this effort by working very closely with our member states, with other institutions. I was speaking about the European Union, but also partners from the civil society, NGOs, think tanks, because to counter disinformation is really a team effort. What is very, very important for us as communicators of an institution that has 30 member states is to be credible, is to be transparent, because we cannot afford to put into question our reputation. We have to be transparent. We have to focus on our own story and also deal with disinformation, but not to always get distracted by disinformation. So this is an effort that is taking a lot of time, a lot of effort, but we have to address it together, not one as a single organization, but together with our member states, together with the whole society.
Yeah, it is very challenging since it requires a lot of coordination. You were in the public relations before the public diplomacy. How is to communicate with the media when some kind of disinformation or misinformation arises? That is one part of the question that came out of my mind when you answer. And the other part is there a possibility to stop the algorithm? I mean, we had a panel discussion at our club a month and something ago about the usage of algorithm, how algorithms change the whole political scene. So is there some kind way to stop the algorithm from constantly producing and spreading the fake news, the disinformation, misinformation, and how to communicate with the media when this kind of disinformation arises?
So to communicate with free media is so important for us. This is why we really support the free media. This is why we support, journalists asking the right question, the difficult questions. As the NATO Secretary General always says, this is paramount for us to do everything we can together with other organizations, together with our governments, to make sure that free and independent media are supported. So this is for us a priority. We engage as an organization with the media every day, all the time. We take the time to deal with their questions, to provide them with, as I said, transparent and fact-based information. This is really a priority, and we, as I say, we cannot put our credibility at stake. We have to be very precise. We have to look at the facts and always be precise with the information that we share with the media. And there is also with the media a relationship of trust, because if you are credible, if you provide facts to the media, they also trust you. So, and this, as I was saying before, is a win-win situation. So we have a long partnership with the media, and we do everything to support with other organizations of the civil society a strong and free independent media. In terms of the algorithms, we see that the challenge is huge, and it's going to be impossible to stop disinformation and basically the technological use and misuse in order to promulgate hostile information activities. This is why what is important is to increase the resilience of our societies, to work together to make sure that people, our citizens, check the facts, that they go to the right sources of this information, that they think twice. That, I think, is the priority. And then also to continue to raise awareness about this challenge, to do everything we can to support small organizations that work with civil society, also with independent media, so that there is more attention, so that there is increased awareness about the huge challenge. But I think the train has left the station, in the sense that this challenge is also going to grow and will continue to grow due to the fact that there will be a misuse and continuous misuse of technology to promulgate false information.
Yeah, I would just like to say, it seems to me that is a more and more a problem since every crisis arises. We had an informational war, disinformation and propaganda during the COVID-19 pandemic, during the last 2 years, now the war in Ukraine, and disinformation, misinformation that are going from there. Do you see the end or how to stop it, or you think it's all about the coordination, the trust between the media and the NATO, and to build up the resilience and educate the citizens, which are the end users of these informations?
I think that what you just said is right, but if you want, we can go to COVID-19 because, as you say, COVID-19 has deeply affected every NATO country and also the entire world. And NATO, at least since the beginning of the pandemic, demonstrated that it can sustain its operations, its missions, its activities, and maintain also readiness despite the pandemic. And also, NATO operated only with the facts and clear communications that allowed or enabled the saving of lives. So we see how important fact-based information is. And some countries, nevertheless, used and misused this crisis, the pandemic, to basically exploit this health crisis. And to share with you the fact that since the start of the pandemic, we have seen, and we also a significant increase in key themes relating to NATO, to allies and partners, used especially by both Russia and China. Mm-hmm. And NATO assessed that by supporting each other's themes, Russia and China strengthened during COVID, but also now, each other's ability to portray authoritarian regimes as more effective than democracies in responding to the pandemic. At the same time, NATO's approach to these two actors remains distinct. So we have a long-standing policy of deterrence and defense, as you know, combined with dialogue in response to Russia's aggressive actions. And in the case of China, we see that China's development presents both opportunities and challenges, which we must address together as an alliance. So all this to say that COVID-19, as you were saying, has amplified the challenge of disinformation and also the potential harm that it can inflict to all of us. And now we are also witnessing how some COVID-19 related disinformation echoed in the context of Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine. For example, the topic of the US biological laboratories and alleged military biological activities in post-Soviet countries. Mm-hmm. So what our information environment analysts saw is that they have identified a clear pattern in Russia and China's activities that show that they seek to use this information to do two things: to portray NATO and its member states as aggressive and responsible, and also to instill a fear among their own domestic populations and among Western audiences. So here, what NATO has done is, again, to focus on fact-based information, to continue to deter, to continue to defend, and to make sure that we are prepared to deal with any challenge, including the huge challenge of increased disinformation and hostile activities. So we have done this through COVID. Now we are facing a similar challenge during the Ukraine crisis. And we are providing support to our member states. We are also working with partners very, very closely, and we are using all available information channels to provide facts, as I said, statistics, visual material, statements. So we do everything we can to focus on what we do, on our decisions.
Yeah, you mentioned a lot of topics. I will try to see the most interesting. What you mentioned was how the authoritarian regimes such as China and Russia are using this information not only to portray NATO as an enemy, as the one who did this and this, as also to instill the fear within their own citizens. What would you say that? Is this a problem within the member states in NATO? The disinformation that are going through the internet media within their own citizens, maybe through some different sources, maybe from China, maybe from Russia, maybe from just some troller from internet. You never know. but this install of fear, how to stop it within the allies or in NATO?
Again, supporting the civil society organizations, I think this is one of the most effective tools that we have. We look at this information and as hostile activities as foreign actors. So our work doesn't focus on hostile activities emanating from inside our member states. This is something that our own member states are dealing with, but again, I think the strongest tool we have is to help our citizens be more resilient, pay more attention, and work closely together at the institutional level. So this is what I think is the way to is what we are doing and continues to be the way to go.
Yeah, thank you very much for the answers. Outside the disinformation, there are also other threats of cybersecurity and cyber defense, such as hackers, the anonymous maybe group, or the others. Do you think that also the education is enough, or do you think that there is required some kind of protection via our devices that we use, via the mobile phones that we daily use, which we cannot imagine our life now, or the laptops? Because I remember one of our professors told that it is very easily to get it via viruses, computer viruses, or etc. What do you think NATO can support this to build up more resilience against the hacker attacks, the viruses, and the other threats to cybersecurity and cyber defense?
As you say, by educating better our citizens. So we in the case of NATO, but of course there are organizations that are bigger than NATO and do much more than we can do, is to launch campaigns. We have launched mini campaigns to increase the awareness of our citizens on the dangers that we are facing, as you say, with our phones and hacking and the different vulnerabilities that we face and we are not aware of. So it's part, I think, of that effort to increase the understanding, to increase awareness, and to inform our citizens. And again, we cannot do this only as multilateral institutions or as governments. We have to do this together with organizations of the civil society, because this is the way that our citizens will learn, will be more careful, and where protection can be enhanced. This is an important area for NATO because, as you said, cybersecurity has now moved to the top of our political agenda. Cybersecurity is part of what we call hybrid threats. And NATO, in the new strategic concept that is going to approve at the Madrid summit in June, is going to look at how we can reinforce our defenses in the area of cyber, but also how we can help our societies and our governments to be more resilient against the hybrid and the cyber threats, which are only growing. So this is one of the big priorities that NATO has on its plate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree, because this is what the last 18 years have brought to the world. You mentioned the NATO summit, and I want to change now the topic. One of the things that will surely be discussed on the Madrid summit at the end of June will be the NATO 2030, which has very ambitious goals. Including building critical infrastructure, building ports and airports, fuel supplies, food and medical equipment, as well as telecommunication networks like 5G. Do you think, I mean, you surely do, but how did the Ukraine crisis affect these goals? Do you think it slowed down or even maybe boosted up, advanced it, since one of the main problems since the Ukrainian crisis arrived was the fuel supplies, the gas, the oil, and the food distribution in the world?
Actually, with your questions, you are also providing the answers, Victor, because you are right that the work, the unprovoked war launched by President Putin in Ukraine has boosted NATO's work on resilience. NATO was already doing a lot of work on resilience, but this has also moved the importance of resilience to the top of our agenda, not only, as you were saying, the NATO 2030 project and initiative, but also on top of the decisions that our leaders will be taking at the Madrid summit in a few weeks' time. So what is a priority now is to do everything to make sure that our societies are less dependent of one source of energy, to make sure that also China doesn't basically get in control of critical infrastructure. So our nations are doing much more to increase the national resilience, but also that national resilience contributes to the collective resilience of NATO as an alliance, because here we are speaking about protecting over 1 billion citizens in Europe and North America, and it's very important that our critical infrastructure is protected, because it can have a very important impact on our security. So less dependencies, more independence, and protection of key infrastructure. This is going to be a priority for the years to come, and NATO will be working very, very, very much on this.
Great. Thank you for the answer. You mentioned China a few times during this conversation to take control of the critical infrastructure. Did you mean that the Horizons of the Belt and Road Initiative, maybe? Because I know that in this initiative they are building a lot of infrastructure, not only ports and airports, but the rail trails and the other technological. Do you think that China is a threat with this massive critical infrastructure building during the former China Silk Way?
Well, we don't see China as an adversary, not at all. So we cannot put China and Russia in the same basket. But what we see is that it's a more assertive China, a China that has taken a global outlook, and China is getting closer to us. So this is why we in NATO are now looking at the opportunities and also the challenges that the rise of China is creating, and it's very important to also look at the aspects of critical infrastructure and become more independent in order to be also more secure.
Thank you, Mama. And also, one thing that will be discussed on summit in Madrid will be the strategic concept. What do you think about the new strategic concept that NATO will launch?
Well, the adoption of the new strategic concept will be one of the biggest decisions that our leaders will take at the Madrid summit, as you are saying. And we have right now a strategic concept that dates from 2010 that has served us very well, but the security environment that was reflected in that strategic concept is very different to the security environment that we face right now. So, for example, now we have a Europe that is not at peace anymore, and the strategic concept in 2010 was presenting a world that was stable, that was predictable. Now we see that there is less predictability. We see that there is no peace, and we also see that there is growing strategic competition. So, therefore, this is one of the key elements that the new strategic concept will take into account. How can NATO be prepared to deal with a completely different security environment? Then the new strategic concept will also have a different approach on China, because China was not mentioned in the 2010 strategic concept. So it will reflect, as I was saying, the opportunities and the challenges that China's rise presents for our security. And then it will also speak in a different way of Russia, because in the current strategic concept, we speak of Russia as a partner. And right now, unfortunately, this is not the situation we are in. Following the aggression by Russia of Ukraine, we are in a situation, we are, I would say, at the lowest level of our relationship in many, many decades. So therefore, we will present Russia in a different way, and we will have to deal with the consequences of what Russia has done in Ukraine, which will be long-standing consequences. So also in reaction to the current security environment, a key element of the strategic concept will be to reinforce and to strengthen our deterrence and defense across the board from a 360% perspective. So looking at all the possible challenges, the challenges coming from the east, but also coming from the south, from all potential directions, and to prepare NATO to deal with the conventional security challenges, but also the new security challenges. We were speaking about cyber, but many other hybrid challenges that we may face. Also the threat of terrorism, which is the most serious asymmetric threat that that our citizens in NATO are facing. The strategic concept will also show the importance of climate change for our security. Mm-hmm. So there is going to be an important chapter on climate change and the security consequences, and how NATO also will contribute to the reduction of emissions and so on. And the new strategic concept will speak much more of the role of emerging and disruptive technologies. This was hardly mentioned in the current strategic concept, and how also NATO can be used to keep its technological edge, and also to be the forum to discuss the ethical use of emerging and disruptive technology. So we have a lot on our plate. There will be a lot on innovation. In the new strategic concept, we will reinforce the role of our partnerships, because we see that with the current challenges, we cannot deal with challenges on our own. We need to work very, very closely with partners. So the new strategic concept will make NATO, summing up, more political, politically stronger from a military point of view, and also will reinforce its partnership role and the rules-based international order. So many things.
So many things. I could barely remember what you all said, but there are a lot of things that will be mentioned in the new strategic concept, and I think it's a very good thing, because even though the horrible scenes now in Ukraine are happening, we can see now the unprecedented harmony between the allies in NATO. They are all judging the Russia aggression in Ukraine, and I think it will be, if you agree, the one of the main topics during the NATO summit, the Madrid summit at the end of the June. I have no question. I would like to get closing words, and my last question would be, what would be your message to the young people who will listen to you in Croatia?
Well, my main message is that without security, you will not be able to fulfill your dreams. Without security, you won't be able to get education. You won't be able to enjoy economic prosperity. You won't be able to enjoy a job. So these days, unfortunately, we cannot take our security for granted. We saw how our citizens in Ukraine were, on weekends, were going to the park, had a very simple and beautiful and easy life, and from one moment to another they don't have security anymore. So let's all work to make sure that we can preserve our security. So being mindful about the importance of investing every day in our security, protect yourself, and be also very, very alert to challenges like the challenge of hostile information, disinformation. Double check everything, go to the different sources to make sure that you are getting factual information, and be resilient.
Madam Romero, thank you very much for doing this with me. I'm very grateful for taking the time and doing the interview. We managed to get a lot of questions, a lot of new information, and good luck with your work. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
See you soon.
See you.
I hope so. See you. Bye.